Floral artists, welcome to another floral design session with me, Carrie, your Flowers of Dreams. So glad you're here again. We've got a really cheerful mix of beautiful flowers that are gonna get us through to that spring season. Kind of go through them here. For our foliage, we have this variegated pittosporum, lovely teardrop shaped leaves, very glossy. I love the variegated variety because it's especially energetic. So hopefully it can kind of, again, kickstart us into this spring season that we know and hope is right, hope and pray is right around the corner. We have our Monte Cassino Asters. Those are in the daisy family. Oh, so cute. They're sort of reminiscent of chamomile, but they're a little sturdier. So if you've ever seen that little tiny daisy-ish flower, chamomile, also called feverfew, this is a similar variety that's commercially grown, and it just lasts a little bit longer. The petals on chamomile tend to be so delicate, and these are very sturdy. This aster variety. So it's in the daisy family. I love them because they feel kind of wildflowery, so it gives that vibe. And of course, some pretty yellows, spray roses, really pretty. We've got, oh yes, all right, love these. Hyacinth. Sometimes I mix up the name and I will accidentally call it hydrangea. This is completely different. So if you know hydrangea, that's more like a summer, late spring, early summer flower. And hyacinth is one of those true early spring bulbs. And you can tell that it's a bulb grown flower by that bottom there. You can kind of see where it was cut off. There's still a little bit of the bulb left. So when you trim this particular cut flower, you don't actually need to trim this stem. Sometimes I'll take a little slice off, but it's a little different than a cut flower that likes to have its stem trimmed. So tulips are like these, daffodils, we also have some daffodils. Mine haven't opened up yet, in the narcissus family. And the life cycle of these plants are typically, they'll be planted in the fall. So you plant your spring bulbs in the fall, and then they overwinter. They get really cold. It helps their growing process, and they're one of the first flowers to come up in spring, right after like our helleborus and some other early winter flowers. So that's kind of when you know spring is upon us, when the tulips and the daffodils. Daffodils are one of my favorite spring flowers. They're very prolific, and they come up year after year. So when you plant a daffodil in your yard, it'll come up again, year and year again. You can dig them up and split them, which is kind of a nice way to grow your daffodil collection. But they're so cheerful. They're like Willy Wonka-esque when they open up. These are not opened up yet, but they'll open up in a day or two. They're in the narcissus family. So you'll sometimes see daffodils in other shapes and colors, sometimes with a cream face and then an orange cup in the center. Those are really pretty. And then for our accent flowers, we've got a Ranunculus. This is another spring flower. You know, really in the Midwest, it's a difficult one to grow in spring. You need to grow it in a hoop house. But they have those lovely wavy heads. Always a favorite. Very sturdy. And then our freesia. This is yellow freesia. So you may have white freesia. Same thing, just a different color. And this is a super fragrant stem. It's great for using in boutonnieres and corsages because it holds up very well. So you'll often see this flower in wedding work, and of course it has just that really pretty shape at the tip. These little tip pieces will not open up, but our yellow buds here, these will open in the next couple of days. Okay, let's get started. I'm gonna try a different technique this time, and I'll show you the design view from the side, and then we'll come back together. I'm gonna work today with my Lazy Susan, which is really helpful to see all sides of the vase. You'll also notice I'm using a different vase. If you do want to use your Flowers or Dreams mason jar, this works just as well. I want to switch it up and try something different this week. So if you do have one of our pots, these are great because they work not only for plants but also for flowers, and I love this color. And I'll show you how to add a little chicken wire in here. You can get chicken wire at craft stores. It's nice to have if you do floral design a lot. So it's reusable. It's a lot like a floral frog, but again, it'll work without the chicken wire as well. So either way will work just fine. It just gives it kind of a little extra oomph, because really when you have a wider mouth, let's just compare these two vases, you need more flowers and foliage to fill up that space. So if you're new to floral design, I usually like to recommend a smaller mouth. You don't want to go so small that you don't have room for any stems, but like a mason jar is the perfect vase to start practicing on as you build your skills and techniques, because it's a little bit smaller than like this wide vase opening. This looks like maybe a 5-inch diameter opening. This is probably closer to like a 4.5, 3-inch opening, so less space to fill. But let's switch over and I'll do a different camera view today so that you can see the design in the 360 on our Lazy Susan. All right, we'll start here with our chicken wire, which you can pick up at craft stores. And don't do what I do and use your clippers to cut your chicken wire. Try to use a pair of wire cutters or maybe a pair of kitchen shears that you don't care about. You want to keep your clippers nice and sharp for your stems. And then you'll go ahead and just mold the chicken wire into a nice little dome. Filled up my water all the way up. This chicken wire is got a powder coating on it, so it's really great at being reused. You can save it after you make an arrangement and use it for your next arrangement, but we'll kind of mold it into the shape of a floral frog. Now, you don't need to be too precious about the shape of your chicken wire. It's really just there as part of the mechanics of the arrangement. It's going to hold everything up. So I've put mine right below the water line, or a little bit above. We don't really want to see the chicken wire. It's really just there to support your stems. If you're not going to be working with chicken wire, that's okay too. Your stems will start to interlock. You're just going to want to maybe cut your pieces a little bit shorter. So the goal is always to fill out our vase first with our foliage when we have a foliage like this. You may need to kind of play with it a little bit till you get it the height where it sits in the vase, or you can preserve some of the fuller pieces like I'm doing here with this little tri piece and use it to create a little more fullness. So spin your arrangement around, check it out from all sides, and then add your stems all the way around to create a nice thick lush nest of foliage that will help to support our flowers. I'm looking for the holes here. So what I mean by hole is a spot maybe where you can see some of the chicken wire still. And you're going to want to cover that up with your foliage, always stripping off anything that's going to be below the water line. Here I'm stem splitting a larger piece, and I'll go ahead and cut as close as I can to the leaf base with that lower piece, and then anchor it really low in the arrangement so you can't see that it's a bottom piece and not a crown piece. It sort of creates the illusion of a really beautiful crown piece. Italian pittosporum, I don't know, it tends to be a little bit on the dirtier side, so you're going to want to clean your water as often as possible and just really make sure that none of your leaf matter is getting into your water. So here's my initial green up. I have a little bit more foliage left that I'm going to use to fill out later on, but we'll move on to our Monte Cassino Aster, which is another great filler flower, very long lasting. I'll split some of these lateral pieces off and then pull off the foliage that's on the base. So anything that will go bad quickly, leaving just the prettiest part, the blooms. Right here I'm bundling 2 stems together. You can do this with smaller pieces or smaller flowers so that they have a little bit of a bigger impact. You can take those little tiny dainty pieces and bundle them into 2s and 3s so that they're clustered and you'll be able to see them a little bit better. It also looks really pretty to kind of scatter everything out, but sometimes I like to take those smaller stems and bunch them in little groupings so that you can see them more clearly, so that they don't get covered up by the foliage. So I'm going to fill out the rest of my holes here. Again, a hole is that negative space. Look for those spots where you can see the chicken wire. You want to cover that up. And then, of course, you'll want to fill in the area within your greenery that doesn't have any flowers yet. So since we've only started with the aster, look for spots where there's no flowers. Those are the areas where you can put your filler flower. And this just starts to take up a little bit more space. I find I really like to have the filler sit right below the foliage frame. So if the top of your arrangement is where the foliage stops, I'm going to put all of my stems a little bit lower within that frame. This is such a well-endowed piece that I'm going to have a lot of aster to go around. I may even save some to add a little bit later, but we'll start to just fill out the space and create some fun varying heights. There I'm bundling again just to create a little bit more impact with our dainty aster flowers. Next, we'll work in our spray roses. This is another one that's got a lot of heads of blooms on the head. So I'll usually stem split kind of at the top center, pull off the extra foliage, do a little petal check. Always want to do this with roses. Check to make sure that every little petal piece is looking its best and doesn't have any bruising. And then I'll add in these taller pieces just to get some more of that hot, bright yellow around the edge of the arrangement. I'll even spin it to the back to kind of add another little piece. You know, some of these blooms, when they have little baby buds on them, they won't open up, but I like to leave them. It's up to you whether you want to take those pieces off. You can. And because I stem split, I was able to get a little bit more out of my 2 stems, and I can add some of that yellow on the back side and even on this other side here. So I'm always spinning my arrangement. Check out where there's not a pop of yellow yet, and you can add a little piece of your spray rose right there. Next, we'll get our hyacinth in there. If you're using chicken wire, it can be a little tricky to get that bulky end of the bulb in. So I'm just going to trim mine off, because if you remember, those little chicken wire cells are small. So as you add more and more stems, it can be tricky to get your stems in. You just want to gently find a spot where there is a hole. And then I'm adding some of the foliage, which you don't have to do, but I think it adds a nice contrast to the teardrop shapes. Usually when I'm thinking about foliage, I'll limit my foliage to only 3 different varieties, since we just have the pittosporum in this one. Adding some of these hyacinth leaves kind of adds some pretty variation and just repeats that spring theme with some of those smaller pieces, even if they're not super loud and flashy, they still add a little something. Your hyacinths are going to open up over the next couple of days. Let's add our freesia next. It's such a pretty shape that I like to let it just pop up and out and around, kind of hovering right over the frame. And we'll add our daffodils next, also closed. You can peel off that little papery piece if you'd like to help it along, but it will open up naturally once it's had some time in the warm air. That base and cup shape will open up over the next couple of days. Daffodils tend to have a pretty fragile stem, so you want to be careful. They're fairly sturdy, but you're going to want to make sure that you're extra gentle with those stems. The ranunculus, let's add that next. Always has a really pretty curve at the top. And again, that's one of our extra special blooms, so we want to make sure that you can see it. So always put it at the top. Might take a little bit of effort to find the perfect spot for your ranunculus. And again, I'm leaving room for all my closed flowers to fully open up. And then I'll just go in and fill in a little bit more with some of my leftover asters. So you can focus either on your holes where you've got some empty spots, anywhere where there's not a flower, or you can go in along the base of the stem or base of the vase, and add some extra foliage to disguise the connection from the vase to the flower. So here I am taking some smaller pieces, those shorter pieces, and I'm just adding a little bit of fluff right at the base. Again, just to disguise the stems, and it'll soften the connection from that hard ceramic vase into your flowers and foliage. And that's just a really nice, beautiful finishing touch for your arrangement if you have some extra foliage. Thank you everyone for joining us for another DIY floral session. I love our yellow creation. It's going to take a couple days to fully open up the bloom. So cheerful, perfect for the beginning of March to keep us going through until we break into spring. See you next week.